Hi, do you want to write a book? Well, you've come to the right place. For today's video, I'm going to be doing somewhat of a part 2 to a video that I made a few months ago, which was telling you all about how I wrote this, the first draft of my novel. But in this video, I'm going to be telling you how you can write the first draft of your novel. Because in that video, it was heavily focused around my writing process, what I did, what I learned, the mistakes I made, the struggles I went through trying to get this out into the world. And back when I filmed that video, I hadn't yet finished my second draft, but now that I have finished my second draft, I filmed pretty much the entire process. So if you're new here, I would recommend going and watching all of my writing vlogs, because in those I detail my actual writing process, like as it's happening, and specifically the writing process of my second draft. And now I feel equipped with the knowledge of 2 drafts under my belt, and now I feel like I'm somewhat more qualified to give out actual writing advice. There's going to be some similarities between that video and this video, but in this one I'm really going to try and break it down into like actionable steps that you can take and focus a lot less on like what I was doing 3 years ago and like what specifically inspired my novel, and more so talk about stuff that hopefully you can use to help you actually write a book. Because I am a firm believer that pretty much every single reader out there has a novel idea in their head. I think it's practically impossible not to when you're reading so many books, not even necessarily reading books, but also watching movies, TV shows, other things. And I've seen so many people, especially like on BookTube, like the majority of the booktubers I've watched, I know have mentioned having a novel idea themselves, but they have never had the time or just have never taken the plunge and actually attempted writing it, or at least stuck to writing it and finishing at least one draft. And so this video is going to be all about how I believe that you, the person watching this that I know has a book idea sitting inside of them that has been in there for probably years now, how you can actually take that idea and turn it into a first draft. I am just going to be talking about getting that first draft out of you because I have, first of all, no authority on the publishing industry whatsoever, other than the stuff that I have read about online, which is the same kind of stuff that you could do. Secondly, because I have no idea how to actually edit a draft. That is my next step in my writing journey, is going to be trying to actually edit my second draft in preparation for draft 3. So I don't know what to do once you finish, but I sure do know how to start and actually finish it. Let us begin with the idea. The root of your story, the seed, the beginning of it all, the idea. I have had novel ideas come to me so fast, I cannot snap, so fast that I was overwhelmed with like so much information inside my brain that just hit me all at once. I mentioned in my last video that road trips are particularly a major source of inspiration for me, so it was on a road trip where pretty much an entire novel idea, obviously with a lot of pieces missing from it, came to my mind, and I spent that whole trip writing down just as much as I possibly could on my phone. Have I worked on that novel idea since? Not really. But the novel that I have continued working on is one that came to me over several years of just thinking about it, getting different story ideas, keeping the same characters, but having the plot constantly change, the setting constantly change, characters disappeared and then came back as someone's sibling. Like, it went through many changes before I actually wrote this thing. I guess I'm trying to say that the idea for your novel can come from anywhere, and that there are many different routes to getting to the beginning point. I also want to talk about how you can find inspiration for your ideas. For me, I think one of the best pieces of writing advice that I have ever heard is write the book that you want to read. I think it's such a simple concept, but it really just sums it up perfectly in how I feel about my own novel that I'm in the process of writing. It is exactly that. It is the kind of book that I want to read. So if you were struggling to come up with that one core idea that I think is probably the most important part of an entire novel, I advise you to think about what things do you love the most in books or in movies or in TV shows, etc. And then I think that the second most important thing, if not the most important thing, is to look back on yourself and your own life and your own experiences that you've had. I think that for my book, the major part of it that is like associated with myself specifically is the main character, and how I just feel like he is a character that only people who are similar to me would be able to write. I guess on the topic on coming up with characters and not just like the story idea as a whole, is to look at yourself and think about what you have. Think about what kind of story you have to share with the world, because ultimately, I mean, the goal of you writing a book doesn't exactly have to be like getting it published and having other people read it, but if that is your goal, think about the story that you have that you need to share with the rest of the world, and a story that is unique to you. I know this sounds like very generic advice, but as I'm saying it, I feel like it's really good advice, and like it's exactly how I feel about my own book and my own writing. So to recap, my major advice for like the idea step of the writing process, which is like the first step of anything, is to try and write the book that you want to read, and also reflect on your own life and your own person and try and figure out how to include that in your writing, in your novel idea, and how your writing your novel can be used as something so much more than just writing a novel, and can be used as a way to like explore an aspect of yourself in a very lengthy form, and also in a fictionalized form, and just in a way, and just how to combine creative fun, yeah, I love this, with also yourself as a person and everything that you have to offer. I don't know. Now let's imagine that you already have an idea, although I already assume that you have an idea if you're watching this, and that everything I just said you've probably already figured out. But next is the fun part. Every single part of writing a book is fun, I don't know what I'm saying. But next is more so the brainstorming process that transitions into the outlining process. So this is the stage where you feel like your head is about to explode because it's full of so many ideas, hopefully. And you have yet to really solidify anything, and you still don't know what the hell your book is gonna be, but you have all of these ideas inside of you. So many ideas for characters, plot, setting, everything, ending, genre, everything. It's just all buzzing around in there. My advice is to just write down every single idea that you have, especially the ones that get you the most excited, but truly anything at this stage, and at any stage, can be used at some point. And it is, in my opinion, essential to actually write stuff down, because literally last night I thought of a title idea for something else that the same book I mentioned earlier that I have not worked on in like 2 years, but the book idea that came to me really suddenly, I thought of a title idea for it. I repeated it to myself over and over again, telling myself, oh, when you wake up to write this down and remember it. Take a wild guess as to whether or not I remembered it. So my advice, and what I try to follow, is to write every single idea down. I know that can be very challenging, but I suggest writing it down just in the notes app on your phone, or a Google Doc or something of the sort, or carrying around a physical notebook with you if that works. Personally, that is not something that really works for me. I prefer writing stuff down just on my phone. I think that's probably the easier option. Another good thing about that is that then you can also have it like on your computer if you're writing it on like a Google document, and then you can look at everything all at once. Just write it down everywhere, everywhere you can. Try and think about your story constantly, although I think that kind of just happens organically, is that an idea will come to you at like the most random moment because of something you saw, or just it just came to you. But I recommend trying to write down as much as you possibly can at this stage, and try and see if like each necessary element of a story will come to you organically, such as like the characters, the plot, etc, etc, you know what they are. And then if you find that you are coming up with a bunch of ideas for characters, and you have like so much information on your characters, but you are missing a true plot, that is when I would recommend trying to more so focus on a specific aspect, and not just free for all, what is this book gonna be? And I feel like it's been a while since I've been in this kind of writing stage where there are so many holes in your story that it can be very overwhelming. But I remember when I was coming up with the very beginning of my novel idea, I went to a lot of random writing generators online that really helped just spark, that really helped me just get the creative juices flowing, even if I didn't end up using like a specific setting idea. But just looking to other resources for the brainstorming process can really help just get the ball rolling when you feel like you are a bit stuck. And there's so many writing resources online, whether it's just like a list, or whether it is like a random generator, and even then there are so many of those that are really cool, and I love looking at them, and I feel like it's been forever since I've done that. Another one of my top recommendations, if not the top recommendation of this video, is to create a Pinterest board and a Spotify playlist or other music streaming service for your project. I swear by my Spotify playlist, and I swear by my Pinterest boards for all of my writing. It's just so nice to see the visuals on a Pinterest board, and when you find those images that just nail exactly what your story is, it's a feeling unlike any other. And then you get to scroll through it and just see everything, and it's like you're looking at your book as if it was a movie. Same thing with songs, especially when I find a new song that has a lyric that fits my story so well, and then I get to add it to my Spotify playlist, and it's such a fun part of writing, and I highly recommend doing it and consistently revisiting them throughout the writing process to like get back into the world of the story. Like maybe condition yourself to listen to the playlist and then start thinking about your characters. I plan on doing a video that dives a bit into my Pinterest boards and my Spotify playlist, because I just think it's so cool to like represent your book in a different way through songs by like other artists that have no idea what's going on inside your head, and yet they seem to write songs that fit your characters so well. And then also going from the song to the character instead of character to the song, if that makes sense. I literally don't know if my story would be the same if Taylor Swift hadn't created folklore. Now, onto the actual outlining process. This is an area where I don't have the most expertise, because I find, like, I want to believe that I love outlining and that I am a planner, because in a lot of other aspects of my life, or just generally, I feel like I am a planner through and through. But when it comes to writing, I don't know what it is, but it doesn't work. First of all, I never stick to what I write down, because everything seems to change the second that I actually start writing the draft. But I also just don't like the process of trying to create an outline and think about like not even thinking about every single chapter, just thinking about the plot as a whole. At a certain point, I just like don't want to do it anymore. I don't know, it's really strange, and I don't know how draft 3 is gonna go, because I want to be more prepared for draft 3, because I think that my first 2 drafts have fallen victim to the fact that I didn't have a proper outline before going in. But at the same time, I'm like, but I don't need an outline. I don't know, I am not the person to give you advice on how to outline, but there, once again, are so many resources online. There's so many different outlining methods. I personally have tried the snowflake method once, but see, I try something and then it just like cuts off 30 minutes in because I don't like it anymore. The way I do outline is that I have a page on my Notion where I can like drag and drop stuff. I like write down the chapter number, and then I give it like a title that's like that just summarizes everything that happens in it. Like my first chapter is called Party at the Lake, and that's literally all it is. And then when I was writing my second draft for pretty much the whole story, I just had final chapter and then like something to describe it, and then there was just a whole bunch of like, it was like chapter 15 blah blah blah, and then final chapter blah blah blah. So there's a whole bunch of chapters in between that were not planned out. So what I would recommend is just trying to outline and maybe trying to follow a specific method and then seeing if it works for you, and then if it doesn't, obviously try something new, and just try and find out what works best for you. And I think that it's something that comes with practice and a whole lot of trial and error. Okay, now onto kind of the final part of this video, because I don't think I want to talk about like what to do once you finish your first draft. That is a whole other realm that I'm currently living in. Maybe in a year from now I'll do like a part 3 of this like video series, and I'll talk about what to do once you finish your first draft. Because hey, maybe if you're watching this a year from now you'll be done, and then I can make a video talking about what to do once you finish your first draft. That's probably not gonna happen, but it's a motivation for you to write. So, writing the draft. I think that every writer would agree that writing the first draft of your first ever novel is an experience unlike any other. I mean, I remember writing my first chapter and just thinking about how freaking cool it was that I was actually writing a book. I think that writing the first chapter is just, it's a magical experience. Staring at that blank page, typing in chapter 1, trying to figure out what your opening line is going to be, hating every single word on that page, wanting to rewrite it over and over again, resisting, coming back to read it months later, and realizing how much you've improved as a writer over the course of your draft. That's what's happened to me with draft 2. I wanted to send my first chapter to my friend, but then I was like, the difference between that chapter and my later chapters was so huge, at least in my opinion, that I like couldn't fathom wanting to send that to someone, because I felt like it didn't represent me as a writer and the person that I became after writing a draft. Because writing a draft is like a very challenging process, and it's one that will drain every single word out of you that exists inside of your head. And when you finally finish, it will feel like such a relief to never have to think about those characters again for the next week or so, and be constantly thinking about the plot and what comes next and how many words you want to write and your writing goals, and just working and working and working towards the point where your draft is finished and you completed it and you completed what you set out to do. And I love writing. Just talking about this is getting me so excited to start writing my third draft, because it's so fun. It's so fun, but it's also so exhausting. Okay, my camera it got too hot because I was filming for too long, so it turned off and then I had to wait for it to cool down. But I'm back to finish whatever the hell I was saying about actually the process of writing the draft itself, which is definitely the hardest part of the whole process of writing a book. I think that goes without saying, but I feel like I have so much more to say and advice to give about the preparation process, because pretty much my one piece of advice for writing the draft is to just do it. Sit down, write those words, learn as you go what it's like to write, how much you can write in one day, how much you can write without stopping, whether or not you want to take breaks as you go along, whether or not you want to try and write it as fast as you possibly can in a short period of time, whether or not you want to try and write as consistently as possible and try and write the same amount of words every single day, or whether or not you want to try and like write a bunch on the weekends and take like breaks in between on the weekdays because they're just way too busy for you, or wanting to schedule like a month-long break in the middle of a project where you just don't write, which is kind of what I unintentionally did during my second draft, is that I like didn't write at all in August. In terms of actually what you're going to use to write it, I personally use Google Docs. It is the one thing that I know how to use, and like it's what I've stuck to since the very beginning. I despise Word. I will never use Word ever. But Scrivener is something that is definitely on my radar, and it's something that I want to try out in 2022 at some point. Although that is, in case you don't know, it's like a paid writing software that has a lot of benefits, such as the ability to have like several documents open on like one page so that you can be like looking at your outline and your actual writing space like at the same time. And there's just so many different features. A lot of them I don't know the specifics of because I haven't looked too far into it, but that is another very popular option for writers, and one that I really want to look into because Google Docs is really basic, but that's kind of what I love about it. And what I actually use for goal planning and tracking my daily word count is Pacemaker. I also know that there are plenty of other writing websites, such as My Write Club, I believe is what it's called. I have been using Pacemaker once again since my first draft, and it is what I like the most because you're able to set a goal. It doesn't even have to be a word count goal. It can be like chapters, pages, so many things, but I do a word count goal for my project and I title it, and I set the date I want to start it and the date I want to finish it, and then it will show you how many words you have to write per day to stay on track with your goal. But you can also change the system so that it can be like 500 words this day, and then the next day you write 1,500, and then the next day you write 500. Like there's a lot of different ways that you can arrange your goal, which I think is really nice. In terms of like actually setting a word count goal, you absolutely do not have to make one if you want to. You can just try and write and see how long it takes for you to finish. But for me, I really like having something that I'm working towards, and I also really like setting a date for me to finish. I would recommend looking into like what the kind of average word count is for the genre you're writing in, because like high fantasy tends to be a lot longer than like a young adult contemporary. But again, while I was writing my two drafts, my word count goal and my like actual time goal changed a bunch throughout the process. It is totally okay for your goals to change. Please do not feel like you need to totally stick to what you said at the very beginning. I think I definitely struggle with turning my writing into something that is a bit of a chore, where I feel like I have to write this amount of words this day. I have to keep up with my goal. I have to write it in this amount of time. And I mentioned this a lot in my writing vlogs, but I struggle with the concept of like just reminding myself that I am writing for myself and I have no external pressure placed on me, because I feel like I get so caught up in word counts and numbers and goals to the point where I think it kind of strips a lot of the fun out of writing. So that is my recommendation to you, is to try and have as much fun with your writing as possible, which again is pretty generic advice, but it's so difficult to find a balance between having fun with it and having it be like a passion of yours, while also wanting to get the draft done and really wanting to make writing something that is a pivotal part in your life, and just figuring out how to balance writing with everything else going on in your life. I discovered this year that once school returned to like typical 6 to 7 hours a day schedule, I found it so much harder to write, and I can barely imagine how difficult it must be if you have like children, or if you have a job, or literally anything in your life and you're also trying to write on top of it. So please take care of yourself and really try and have as much fun with it as possible. It's really, really hard to try and find the balance and try to figure out how to squish writing into your life while also trying not to make it stressful and trying to keep it fun, but also making it, I don't know, it's really hard. But it's so worth it to have a draft to hold in your hands and to envision the possibility of your book someday ending up in the hands of someone else and the impacts that your story can potentially have on other people. And speaking as someone who has finished 2 drafts, it is worth every single moment of suffering as you struggle along through it. And I think that every single writer is going to have such a different and unique experience with writing their first draft and just the writing process in general and how it evolves as you learn more and more from writing more and more. And I think that's everything. I did not prepare very much for this video and I feel like it was a little bit all over the place, but at the same time I feel like I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and that is really just trying to encourage you to go out and write your book. Specifically in 2022 as it is January, but also just in general. And I really hope that you gained something from this video and that I was able to offer some kind of advice while also talking about my own process. If you haven't seen how I wrote my first draft video, I would recommend watching that too, because I go even more in detail about my own personal experiences. My last piece of advice is to do like writing sprints, set a 10-minute timer and then just write for those 10 minutes. That definitely got me through a lot of my first draft. And really at the end of the day, all writing is just sitting in front of your computer or whatever it is and getting those words out. My throat is literally, I say this at the end of every video, but my throat is genuinely hurting as I speak. I can feel it getting dry. So that is everything. Go write your book, please. I believe in you 110,000%, because if I was able to write this, I think that you can too. I really think that anyone is capable of writing a book as long as they are capable of persevering through something that is challenging at times, is extremely time consuming, is extremely mentally draining. The list goes on, but I truly believe that you can do it. And truly try to find that spark in your story and what it means to you and why you need to write it. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.